gospel today comes from the Gospel of Luke, and there we read. Jesus and his disciples arrived at the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. As Jesus stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he'd break the bonds and be driven by the demons into the wild. Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered into him. They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss. Now, there on the hillside, a large herd of swine was feeding, and the demons begged Jesus to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When the swineherd saw what had happened, they ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came out to see what had happened. And when they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told them how the one who had been possessed by demons had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, for they were seized with great fear. So Jesus got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might go with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. Let us pray. Lord, may your words only be spoken and your words only heard, and we do ask this all for your love's precious sake. Amen. Please be seated. Well, as you know, we are continuing a sermon series that we are calling The Marvelous Universe, and it's a look at what's not marvelous about a fictional comic book universe, but what's marvelous about our own universe, a play on the Marvel universe, the marvelous universe, but not a fictional comic book universe, the actual universe in which we live, which is perhaps even more marvelous still. And it's a look at what's not super about these fictional superheroes, but what's super about the people around us. And this morning, in particular, we want to talk about what's super about our dads, and in particular, our St. Matthew's dads. And I cannot overemphasize how important this is. I have been a priest for 30 years, going on 30 years, be 30 years this year. Before that, I was a seminarian and a youth minister. And so I'm probably on 40 years of ministry. I've done ministry in all kinds of settings, in churches, at camps. I've done them in cities, in suburban areas. I've done them in big churches and little churches. I've done them in gyms, on piers, anywhere and everywhere. And I have talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, if not thousands at this point. I've just talked to people from every walk of life imaginable and every situation imaginable. And I can tell you, hands down, without a shadow of a doubt, that the number one most common problem that people deal with, the thing that sets people back more than anything else, is the relationship with their dads. I mean, obviously not always, but the most common problem of all problems, the thing that comes up more often than anything else, is people who in some way, shape, or form did not have the relationship with their father that they wish they had, that they did not get from their dad what they needed to get from their dad. And that can be what's often called passive abuse. Passive abuse is simply neglect. It's simply neglect. It's the dad who's disengaged, the dad who's checked out, the dad who makes work a priority, the dad who's too drunk every night to know what's going on in the household. More common than you'd think. Actually, pretty darn common. It can be active abuse. Active abuse is the dad whose anger is out of control. I mean, the dad who's just... And anger isn't always raging. You know, there are cold, silent angers, depression, that stony silence. And that's another form of anger. It can be the dad who's cruel. It can be the dad who's physically abusive. It can be the dad who is abusive in other ways. And again, those are nowhere near as rare as you might think. Kind of disturbing, but and so, you know, the kind of dad we are, so much hinges on that. Because for some people, the relationship with their father, what they didn't get from their dad, or what they did get from their dad that they didn't want from their dad, will define their life, their whole life long. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so thankful for the St. Matthew's dads, is because I look at you guys and just everywhere I look, I see you doing it right. And I have always wanted to be a better father. I've never felt in any way, shape, or form adequate as a dad. I've always felt like I need all the help I can get, and I've just been so thankful to be able to look to so many of you and to see you guys getting it right and to be encouraged by you and inspired by you and to know that I'm in this with you. And as I've been thinking about this sermon now for actually several months, I thought I want to get down to 3 things that I think St. Matthew's dads do really well. And that was hard because I see you doing more than 3 things really well. But I got it down to these 3. What I see you all doing so well is giving your kids direction, giving your kids protection, and giving your kids a well-ordered life. So direction, protection, and order. And I think these are the gifts that a good father gives to his children. Direction, protection, and order. Let's start with direction. I don't mean an authoritarian, you will do this, and although there's a place for that. But I mean more teaching our kids to be self-directed. And frankly, that simply comes through being present. That comes through being present. And really, if I could distill all my experience as a father, if I could distill all my experience as a priest, if I could distill everything I have ever learned into sort of one thing, I would suggest that the thing on which everything rises and falls is how present we are to our children. And that's a lifelong need, by the way. That doesn't stop when our kids get older. And how present we are in our children's life, that is the bedrock on which everything is built. And you've heard me say this 1,000 times before, there is no quality time without quantity time. You just never, ever get to quality time if you don't first log the quantity of time. And the reason that's so important is being present to kids. It's when we're present with our kids that we make our kids feel secure and instead of being fearful and insecure. When a father's absent, children feel fearful and insecure. And when people are driven by fear and insecurity, they will always make poor decisions. And when a father's present, when parents are present, then children know that they're loved. And if a father's absent in any one of a dozen ways, then children will never feel like they're worthy. They were never worthy of their father's attention. They were never worthy of their father's presence. They were never worthy of their... And so this becomes sometimes called the father wound. And they'll spend the whole rest of their lives trying to prove their worth. And that often leads to some of the most destructive behavior you can imagine. And when a father is present, then a father can notice those things that a father wants to reinforce. And that's how direction is provided, by what a parent pays attention to. And frankly, if a parent's not present and isn't able to pay that, then a kid's got to figure it out for themselves. And most of the time, kids don't figure it out for themselves. They pay attention to the wrong things. And what I want to suggest, I see you guys doing, and I love this about you, is that you've figured it out that far more important than achievement is character. I mean, achievement's important, but far more important than achievement is character. And when what we emphasize is achievement, whether the kid wins, whether the kid, kid's grade point average, what school a kid gets into, the kid's job, this or that, then a child begins to feel like they've got to achieve to be loved. And this is the most terrible form of insecurity of all, because what they get driven by is just fear. They just get driven by fear that if they don't perform, if they're not at the top of their class, if they're not landing the best job, if they're not out there being an athlete making their mark, if they're not in some way just rising above everybody else, and then they're not going to be loved, they're not going to be worthy, they're not going to be, and this just drives people. It's a terrible, terrible driver. Thing is, we just can't always control that. We can't always control outcomes. For whatever reason, I think my parents would tell you this. They had a lot of demons early on in their life. I don't mean literally, I mean, you know what I mean by that. And it was really as they came to be active in their faith that they were able to begin to work through some of those demons and create different histories for our families. But early on, I didn't have the benefit of a lot of that. And so I grew up very performance-driven. But I mean, I was driven in such a way by performance that I was just inside, I was a terrified little kid that if I did not perform at this level, man, nobody was going to love me, nobody would pay attention to me, I wouldn't be worth anything. I mean, so when I was in school, because school is a very controlled environment. So I'd often be at the very top of my class. I'd often set the curves. Hebrew, which everybody's struggling with, and the test scores. And you'll see why I'm telling you this. I'm not bragging, even though it sounds like it. You have test scores, and the teacher would grade on the curve, and everybody's down here, and I'd have this one score that'd be way up here, and then I never forget him saying, "Hey, this guy here, this is the guy none of you like. He's the curve breaker." I'm thinking, "Oh my goodness, why in the world did you say that?" I would get notes from my teachers, literally, that would say, "You're the best student we've ever had. I'm so glad that that you were," and so on and so forth. And then, I'm used to performing, controlled environment. I know how to perform, and then I get out in the real world, and the real world's different. And now I have a church of 400 people, and there are churches with 40,000 people. So you talk about a performance curve. Now I'm not at the top, I'm down near the bottom. And that introduces an existential crisis of epic proportions when you can't perform, because somewhere, I don't care how smart your kid is, somewhere along the line they're going to meet somebody who's smarter. That's just the truth. I don't care how gifted your kid is. Somewhere along the line, they're going to meet somebody who's more gifted. I don't care how well your kid performs. Somewhere along the line, they're going to meet somebody. And when that day happens, if their self-image rises and falls on performance, that is going to be an existential crisis of epic proportions. I felt betrayed. I felt angry. I felt like I'd been lied to. And I entered into the single most destructive year of my life. And began to just, because, so it's the wise parent who says it's not achievement, man, it's character, because character we can control. What we catch is our kids doing good. What we catch is our kids trying hard. It's not whether a kid wins. It's how a kid, did you do your best? Did you have fun out there? Did you help somebody? Did you care? That's why I love that image of the Parkview soccer team where there's the kid who is on the other team, just on the field crying because they lost, and the guy from the Parkview team comes up and picks the kid up and hugs him, and just that's really in our congregation there is a kid who really is a kid of stratospheric intelligence. We all like to think our kids are, but most of our kids, my kids included, really aren't. Well, this kid sort of really is, and he got into probably the most prestigious university in the world, most difficult university to get into in this field, an incredibly difficult field, absolutely just demanding. But he would never tell you that, and his parents would never tell you that. You'd have to ask your parents, and then you'd have to ask his parents specifically, "Hey, what's he doing in his school?" And if you push them, they'll tell you, but they'll tell you matter-of-factly and reluctantly. They won't tell you, "Oh yeah, you got," And there's nothing about it on social media, because the kid said, "I don't want this on social media." And he said to his parents, "I don't want you to put this on social media." He says, "Because I don't want to gloat." And he said, "Because a lot of my friends didn't get into the schools that the schools they want to get into, and I just don't want to make them feel bad." And what I loved about seeing that in a parent is they're more proud of their kid's heart than they are of their kid's achievement. And in achievement, again, you can't control that. But what's here, you can control that. Noticing our kids doing well, being kind to each other, being kind to their siblings, being kind to the people around them, noticing our kids helping out, being involved in ways they can help out. See, that's the kind of stuff that makes a difference. But you got to be present to notice that and pay attention to that. And seeing you guys do that, man, that has inspired me. That has helped me, coming from that achievement orientation, which I still, as you know, if you know me, I'm still, it's been just so helpful for me to see how you do that so well. So thank you. And then second of all is protecting our kids. And even though we live in a world that is safer, statistically we look at it, all the statistics say the world's actually safer than it's ever been, and I tend to believe that. But we're also a world where everybody's more connected, and we just hear every bad thing that ever happened, so it doesn't feel safe anymore. But as safe as the world may be, there are very real threats. And a father's chief roles in life is to protect his kids. Is to protect his kids from the real threats that are out there. And one of the ways that we do that, there's a lot of ways, but one of the most important ways we do that is by setting standards. Because what standards are guardrails. Standards are non-negotiables. They're absolutes. You will not do this, you will do that, because if you don't, the consequences are going to be bad. They might be disastrous. You might lose your life. Literally. So that's why you don't play in traffic, for instance. That's not a non-negotiable. That's not a negotiable, right? That's non-negotiable. Kid says, "I want to go out and play on Sterling Boulevard." You don't say, "Okay, yeah, all right." do whatever you want because, you got to find yourself. Go out and, no. You say, no. And the kid goes out there, you grab him by the scruff of the neck, and that's a non-negotiable, right? You always hear me say, I grew up in Pittsburgh, taking a bath. I never would have taken a bath. I mean, I was a little boy. Little boys don't take baths. I mean, what little boy wants to take a bath? That was a non-negotiable. The only reason I have friends today is because my parents made me take baths. I mean, that just wasn't a negotiable. Going to church. People sometimes say I struggle with church. I mean, you just got to decide whether that's a negotiable or not. But if you give a kid that as a background, that will protect a kid from so many things their whole life long. You just have, many of you do. What an incredible gift that is to give a kid. And again, I speak from experience. But that's a non-negotiable because kids are smart. They know what's negotiable and what's not. If there's any waffle, all right, they'll press. But if they learn that it's just wasted energy, it's just wasted energy. In the Merola family, Sunday morning, what do? You go to church. I don't want to go to church today. It doesn't matter. Get in the car. But you do that 3 or 4 times, the kids learn it's just wasted energy. So they stop pushing back. They just get in the car. I don't want to take a bath. I don't care. You're in the bathtub. Okay. Well, it's just wasted energy. You learn that. Okay, I'm going to take a bath. And then pretty soon I realized taking a bath's a great thing, and then you internalize that. That's standards. That protects a kid. And I love the fact that in a day and age where so many people are so undisciplined and we have such a tendency to let people just sort of do what they want to do, and that doesn't serve them well in the long run, is that you guys are not afraid to have standards and uphold those standards. And you got to be willing to have your kids be angry with you. You got to be willing to have your kids not like you. In some ways, what determines how far a kid will be able to go is how much their parents can tolerate pain. Because if a parent can't tolerate pain or discomfort, they're going to jump right in. They're going to relax the standard. They're going to solve the problem. Because they can't stand seeing their kid in any kind of discomfort. So they want to live with the kid. And the kid never then develops the skills they need to succeed in life, never internalize the standards they need that protects them from going off the guardrails. And so I look at you guys, and again, I struggle with this because I hate seeing my kids in pain. I mean, it's the worst thing of all things for me in the world. That when my kids had fevers, that would just almost send me ballistic because there's nothing I could do about it. I wanted so much. And to see you guys have standards and to uphold those standards. And the thing about standards, and this is what I love about you, is you don't pass standards on through lectures. You pass them on through pictures, right? It's not words, it's example. It's not, you got to do this, you got to do that. This is what I do. And the kids love and support their parents. They want to be like their parents, and they do what the parents do. And you provide your kids with so many pictures of what those standards look like. Of helping other people, of going on mission trips, of being in church, of doing the things that serve your kids so well, and they look at that and they say, I want to be like that, and then they follow your example, and that protects them from all the things that so many of the people around them are going to experience. It's a great gift. It's an unbelievable gift. There was one father here who used to come to church, and when he would come to church, he'd just come to church with a $1,000 bill in his wallet. And he would come up to me and he would say, I don't know if they have $1,000 bills, but he'd have $1,000 in his wallet. Maybe it's 10 100s. I don't really remember. But he would always say, he'd just come up to me virtually every Sunday and say, hey, look, is there anybody in need? Is there somebody that's going and struggling? Is there somebody? Because if there are, I want to help them. That kind of generosity. He has incredibly generous kids. Why? Not because he told his kids you have to be generous, because they saw in their father an incredibly generous man. So standards, they protect our kids, but they come from pictures, not examples. They come from pictures, not lectures. And then the final thing is just to give our kids the gift of order. And even though the world is safer than it's ever been, I think kids have more anxiety than they've ever had. And again, because I think all the threats are magnified. And I don't know that any of us can appreciate how much anxiety our children have in this day and age. And so it's a disordered world. And so to create order for children, it's one of the greatest gifts you can possibly give a child. And how do we give order? We give order by being consistent ourselves. This is why it's so important for fathers to love their wives well. If a father doesn't love a mother, if a child looks at his dad and his dad doesn't love his mom well, he draws a conclusion. If he doesn't love her well, then he's not going to love me well either, and he's probably going to be right. So again, a way to just introduce order is by having a well-ordered life yourself. When you love your wives well, you're saying to your kids, I'm going to love you well. Because a kid looks at you and says, man, my dad always goes to bat for my mom. He always makes my mom a priority. He's always going to go to bat for me. He's always going to make me a priority. You know, my dad loves my mom well. I can count on my dad to love me well. That kind of order, that just drops the anxiety level way, way down. And then having rituals and routines that every single week you can just count on, things that you can count on, just like clockwork. I mean, having one or two things in life that you just know no matter what you can count on, boy, does that drop anxiety levels. That kind of structure, it's just and so when you, week in and week out, I mean, when you're in church, when you have your families in church, when you have your kids, you talk about a thing that in a disordered, terrifying world brings peace and order, and what a gift, and what a wise person who realizes that. And again, I've been so thankful, and in this one I've been thankful because I do so much counseling with people in one form or another. I'm just thankful when I look at your kids because I see the gift that you're giving them, and I see what a difference that makes, and I just think that's such a beautiful thing. Well, here's the last thing I want to say, and then we're done. And for this to happen, for fathers to direct their children appropriately, to provide protection for the children, to order, we got to do inner work. So in other words, the easiest thing for us to do is just to pass on what we've been given, right? But sometimes we didn't get what we need, and sometimes we got stuff we didn't want. And so the easiest thing for a dad to do is just say, I didn't get it, so I'm not going to give my kids it either. I didn't get love and affection. Most of us grew up in a generation where our dads just really didn't express much in the way of affection. I didn't get an affection. I turned out okay. You're not going to get it either. Or we got something from our dad we didn't want to get. You know, we got, and then we just pass that on. And the thing is, and so we're going to have to do some inner work to look and sort some of this stuff out. We're probably not going to get this help from the family of origin. Think for a second about being an alcoholic. I mean, somebody has watched their whole family. I mean, you see this so often. This is one of the most heartbreaking of all things, is the way a person will just, they grew up, they watched alcohol wreck their own family. I mean, absolutely just systemically destroy their family, and then they repeat it with their own family. Why do they do that? Because their family doesn't want them to quit. Where do they get the alcoholism from? They got it from their family. And so if they deal with being an alcoholic, what that means is their family's going to have to deal with being alcoholics. If I always went drinking with my brothers, you know, and I get straight, then my brothers, they're going to have to deal with getting straight too. So they want me to keep on drinking so they can keep on drinking so that we can all have a big party together. Family is going to be no help to you on that. And so you're going to have to find help somewhere else. And it's only the person who does this kind of inner work who says, okay, character is more important than accomplishment, but what's more important to me? I said that to my kid, but really, am I driven by accomplishment? Where a father says, okay, I want my kids to have standards, but actually, what are my standards? How am I showing them those standards? I want my kids to have a well-ordered life, but is my life well-ordered? And that takes hard inner work. And that takes reflection. And that is what church excels at. That's why church is so important. In a day and age where it says externals are what life's all about, looking good, exercising, being fit, wearing the right clothes, having a fancy house, having nice clothes, going good. What the church says is externals don't matter if internals aren't working. This is so much more important than anything else. If you don't get this right, nothing else will matter. And week in and week out, what church reminds us is we got to do that inner work. And I am so grateful to you as fathers who recognize that, and week in and week out, you are here. And many of you didn't have a spiritual life. Many of you didn't have fathers who gave you the gift of a spiritual life. Many of you grew up in spiritual traditions that weren't life-giving, and yet you recognize the importance and have built this into your life, and in doing this have given your kids a gift of immeasurable worth. I am so grateful to you for that. And last week, Pittsburgh Penguins won the Stanley Cup. What an amazing thing. What a great thing that. Why are you guys shaking your heads at that? Why are you shaking your heads? They had this great big trophy. Well, you know what? There's no trophies that are given out for being a dad, but you should get one. And all those hours that you've spent praying for your kids, all those hours you spent loading your kids in cars and getting them to church, all those hours you've encouraged kids to go on mission trips, be in youth group and Sunday school, all those hours where you have told them, you know, tucked them into bed at night and told them you've loved them, all the things that you've sacrificed. A lot of us don't have a lot of money, and so for our kids to have what they want to have, that means we go without. You know, and we wonder if it's all worth it. Because so often it just seems like, you know, it's maybe not appreciated, maybe not making a difference. When we discipline our kids and our kids push back and they hate us or get angry with us, it's hard I mean, you know, is it really worth it? I want to say to you, it's worth it. It does not go unnoticed or unappreciated. I notice. You have been such a help and an inspiration to me. Thank you. God notices. But most of all, one day your kids will notice. And they will be so very thankful. If anybody deserves a Stanley Cup, man, it's you.